I never thought I'd be standing in the pristine living room of the Sullivan family mansion, watching my sister-in-law Amanda tear apart my career choices in front of 50 guests. But here I was, clutching my champagne glass so tightly I feared it might shatter, forcing a polite smile as she continued her practice performance. You know, Amanda's voice carried across the room with the precision of a surgeon's knife. When Michael first told us he was dating his secretary, we thought he was joking. She paused, letting out a theatrical laugh that several guests nervously echoed. I mean, who actually marries their secretary these days? My husband Michael squeezed my hand under the table, his jaw clenched. We were at the Sullivan family's annual summer party, an event that somehow always turned into Amanda's personal stage for undermining me. 3 years of marriage to Michael, and I was still the outsider, the girl who didn't belong in their world of old money and social connections. But Emma's quite good at filing papers, aren't you, dear? Amanda continued, swirling her expensive champagne. Though I suppose someone has to do those essential tasks. I felt the familiar burn of humiliation creeping up my neck. What Amanda didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I hadn't been just a secretary for over 2 years. But Michael and I had agreed to keep my career progression quiet, wanting to avoid his family's interference. Actually, Amanda, Michael started to rise, but I touched his arm gently. Not yet. The timing had to be perfect. You're right, Amanda, I said, maintaining my composure. Everyone has to start somewhere. How's the interior design business going? The subtle dig hit its mark. Amanda's latest venture had folded within 6 months, like all her previous attempts at a career. Her perfectly plucked eyebrows narrowed. At least I'm not still answering phones and getting coffee, she shot back. What's it been now, Emma? 3 years of, what do they call it? Administrative support. From across the room, I could see my mother-in-law Diana hiding her smirk behind her champagne glass. She'd never approved of Michael's choice to marry me, constantly reminding him of the society girls she'd hoped he'd choose instead. Tell me, Emma, Amanda continued, her voice dripping with false concern, do you ever regret not finishing college? I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a secretary forever, but surely you had bigger dreams. The room had grown uncomfortably quiet. Even the usual background chatter had died down as the guests waited to see how this would play out. I checked my phone discreetly, 7:45 p.m. Perfect timing. You know what, Amanda? I stood up slowly, smoothing down my dress. You're absolutely right. Everyone should have dreams, goals they're working toward. Speaking of which, I'm expecting a guest. They should be here any minute. Amanda's perfectly painted lips curled into a dismissive smile. Oh? Another secretary friend coming to join the party. Just then, the butler appeared at the entrance. Mrs. Sullivan, Mr. Sullivan, Ms. Victoria Chen, CEO of Meridian Technologies, has arrived. The name sent a ripple through the room. Victoria Chen was a legend in the business world, known for turning Meridian Technologies into a multi-billion-dollar company. She was also notoriously private, rarely attending social functions. Victoria swept into the room with a commanding presence that had made her famous. Her sharp eyes scanned the crowd until they found me, and her face broke into a warm smile. Emma, she called out, making her way through the stunned crowd. I hope I'm not too late. Traffic was horrible downtown. Amanda's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Diana's usual composed expression cracked slightly. Michael, who had kept our secret all this time, couldn't hide his proud smile. Not at all, I replied, stepping forward to greet her. I'm so glad you could make it. Victoria hugged me warmly, a gesture that made several guests gasp quietly. She was known for her strictly professional demeanor. How could I miss this? After all, she turned to face the room. It's not every day your chief operations officer gets named as one of Fortune's 40 under 40 rising business leaders. The silence in the room was deafening. Amanda's perfectly manicured hand trembled slightly, causing her champagne to slosh dangerously close to the rim of her glass. Diana's face had gone pale, her usual mask of superiority cracking under the weight of this revelation. Chief Operations Officer. Amanda's voice had lost its earlier confidence. But you're just a secretary? Victoria finished for her, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. Emma hasn't been a secretary for over 2 years. She's been instrumental in Meridian's latest expansion into European markets. In fact, she reached into her briefcase, pulling out a sleek folder. That's partly why I'm here tonight. Emma, I know we were going to announce this next week, but I thought your family might want to be the first to know. Victoria opened the folder with deliberate slowness, letting the tension build in the room. I could feel every eye on us, the earlier mockery replaced by intense curiosity. Even the waiters had stopped circulating, frozen in place with their trays of appetizers. As of next month, Victoria announced, her voice carrying effortlessly across the silent room, Emma will be taking over as CEO of our European division. The board voted unanimously this morning. The champagne glass finally slipped from Amanda's fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The crash seemed to break some sort of spell, and the room erupted in murmurs. Diana Sullivan sank into the nearest chair, her face ashen. But that's impossible, Amanda sputtered, ignoring the broken glass at her feet. She was just answering phones and filing papers. When I first hired Emma as my executive assistant, Victoria cut in smoothly. She was already taking night classes to finish her MBA. Did you know that, Amanda? While handling my entire schedule, she was also graduating top of her class at Northwestern. Michael stepped forward, sliding his arm around my waist. That's why she was always too busy to attend your weekend shopping trips, Amanda. She was building her future, not spending it. I leaned into his embrace, remembering those exhausting years, working full-time, studying at night, falling asleep over textbooks, while Michael quietly brought me coffee and reminded me why it would all be worth it. But why didn't you tell us? Diana finally found her voice, though it trembled slightly. All this time we thought. You thought what you wanted to think, Mother, Michael replied, his tone uncharacteristically hard. You never once asked Emma about her goals or dreams. You were too busy reminding me about all the society daughters I could have married instead. Victoria pulled out another document from her folder. Emma actually led the team that acquired Sullivan Industries' European competitor last year. Remember that deal, Mr. Sullivan? Michael's father, who had been unusually quiet throughout the evening, suddenly straightened in his chair. That was you, he asked, looking at me with new eyes. The mysterious negotiator who never showed their face but managed to save us millions on that deal. I nodded, allowing myself a small smile. I thought it might be awkward if you knew who was handling the negotiations, given the family connection. Awkward. Amanda's voice had taken on a shrill edge. You went behind our backs, infiltrated our family's business dealings. She said your family's European division. Victoria interrupted sharply. The terms she negotiated prevented a hostile takeover that would have cost Sullivan Industries millions. Though I'm not surprised you didn't know about that, Amanda. How many of your father's board meetings have you actually attended? Amanda's face flushed deep red. It was a direct hit. She always claimed to be consulting for her father's company, but everyone knew it was just a title with no real responsibilities. I've been watching Emma's progress for years, Victoria continued, her voice softer now. From the day she started as my assistant, I knew she was different. She didn't just handle tasks, she improved them, created new systems, identified inefficiencies. Even as a lowly secretary, she glanced pointedly at Amanda. She was already thinking like a CEO. The room had grown so quiet you could hear the ice clinking in glasses. Diana Sullivan was staring at her hands, her usual pristine composure completely shattered. Mr. Sullivan was still examining me with that calculating look he reserved for business matters, as if seeing me for the first time. The board meeting this morning wasn't just about Emma's promotion, Victoria added, pulling out one final document. We're also announcing a major partnership between Meridian Technologies and Sullivan Industries, a partnership that Emma orchestrated, which will double both companies' market share in Europe. Mr. Sullivan's eyebrows shot up. This was news even to him. I've been working on the deal in secret for months, wanting it to stand on its own merits rather than family connections. The papers are ready to sign, I said, speaking directly to my father-in-law for the first time that evening. If you're interested, of course. The terms are all laid out, and I think you'll find them more than fair. He reached for the document with hands that shook slightly. As he read, his eyes widened. This is brilliant, he muttered, flipping through the pages. The structure, the tax advantages. Who came up with this framework? That would be your daughter-in-law, Victoria replied, her pride evident. The same one your family seems to think is only capable of filing papers and answering phones. The days following the party were a whirlwind of changes. The partnership announcement made headlines in every major business publication, with my name front and center. My phone buzzed constantly with congratulatory messages and meeting requests. But the most interesting reactions came from within the family. Mr. Sullivan, James, as he now insisted I call him, was the first to truly come around. The morning after the party, he showed up at my office unannounced, carrying a thick folder of company reports. "I've been reviewing our European operations," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "And I have some questions about the merger structure you proposed." He paused, a hint of a smile breaking through his usually stern expression. "If you have time to explain it to your old father-in-law, that is." We spent 3 hours going through the details. By the end, he wasn't just listening, he was taking notes. As he stood to leave, he cleared his throat awkwardly. "Emma, I owe you an apology," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "I made assumptions, unfair ones, and in doing so, I nearly missed seeing what an asset you are, not just to our family business, but to our family." Diana took longer to adjust. She still hosted her weekly family dinners, but the dynamic had shifted dramatically. Gone were her subtle digs about my background. Instead, she seemed almost nervous around me, as if unsure how to interact with this new version of her daughter-in-law who commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals. It all came to a head one Sunday evening, as I was helping her clear the dishes. "I always wanted a daughter who would carry on the family legacy," she said suddenly, her hand stilling on a china plate. "When Michael married you, I thought," she trailed off, looking ashamed. "You thought he was throwing away his future," I finished for her. "I was wrong," she whispered, and I could see tears in her eyes. "So terribly wrong. You've done more for this family's legacy than Amanda or I ever have." Speaking of Amanda, she avoided family gatherings for weeks after the party. When she finally reappeared, she was subdued, her usual sharp tongue noticeably restrained. I found her alone in the garden one evening, nursing a glass of wine. "How did you do it?" she asked as I approached. "Work full-time, study for your MBA, and still manage to," she gestured vaguely, "be perfect enough that Michael never doubted you." I sat down beside her. "It wasn't about being perfect, Amanda. It was about having goals and working toward them. And Michael supported me because he saw me working, not pretending." She was quiet for a long moment. "I've never actually worked for anything," she admitted softly. "Everything was always handed to me, until it wasn't." "It's never too late to start," I replied. "The business world always needs smart, determined women." 2 months later, Amanda enrolled in a business program. She still had her moments of attitude, but there was a new respect underlying our interactions. Sometimes she even asked for advice about her studies. Michael, my rock through all of this, just smiled knowingly as he watched his family transform. "I told you they'd see it eventually," he said one night as we lay in bed. Though I have to admit, Victoria's entrance was pretty spectacular. "You should have seen Amanda's face," I laughed, snuggling closer to him. "I think she still has nightmares about dropping that champagne glass." "You know what I love most about all this?" he asked, playing with my hair. "Not that you proved them wrong, though that was amazing, but that you did it your way, quietly, professionally, without ever stooping to their level of pettiness." I thought about that as I prepared for my first day as CEO of the European division. My office overlooked the city where I'd once worked as a secretary, dreaming of something bigger. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every late night, every snide comment, every moment of doubt. Diana and James hosted a farewell dinner before our move to London. As I looked around the table at my now supportive family, I couldn't help but smile at how things had changed. Amanda was buried in a business textbook, pausing occasionally to ask her father questions about corporate structure. Diana was proudly showing off the latest article about the merger to anyone who would listen. And James was actually taking notes as I explained our expansion plans. "A toast," James announced, raising his glass. "To Emma, the best thing that ever happened to the Sullivan family, though we were too blind to see it at first." "To Emma," they echoed, and this time, there wasn't a hint of sarcasm or resentment in their voices. I squeezed Michael's hand under the table, remembering all the nights he'd encouraged me to keep going, to not let his family's judgment derail my dreams. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about rising so high that those who look down on you have to look up to see you.